So the Z Flip is a really interesting phone. It's foldable, which is insane, and it has foldable glass and a really pocketable form factor that's kind of like an engineering feat. But it had me thinking, is this just like an old flagship in a new build? Like, is this just like the S20 but just with a facelift, or are the cameras actually better on the Z Flip with like Samsung's better image processing and new software features and things like that? So because of that, I decided I would make this video comparing the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip's camera to the iPhone 11 Pro. So not only will we get a camera comparison in this video, but we're also going to get a lot of samples from the Z Flip. So I'm excited about that. It's an MBT style camera comparison, bringing them back. I also just want to note that I'm looking at a computer over here, and that's so I can like give you the best analysis of the image. And I also want to note that this is just my opinion and it's not fact. So if you disagree, I would love to know. So leave it in a comment below nicely. And I also want to make a note that this video is not sponsored by Samsung or Apple. Okay. Let's dive right in. So I always like to start off these camera comparison videos by doing like a standard dynamic range test, because dynamic range is a really important factor into having a great camera. So we got to see if they nail it. So they actually both did pretty well with this. This was taken on like their primary lenses. And I think that I actually kind of prefer like the cooler color tone that the 11 Pro provides for this image, but that's definitely a personal preference. The Z Flip went a little bit warmer, which makes the sky not look as good, but it actually really complements the colors of the building. It's not the most accurate, like true to life color tone though. The Z Flip does win though in separating the sky from the building in the back. The Z Flip added a lot of contrast to the building, so it kind of like looks like a different color, whereas like if you compare the 11 Pro image right next to the Z Flip, it looks a little bit washed out. It seems like the Z Flip overdid it a little bit overall on contrast, but the iPhone 11 Pro could have used a little bit more contrast. The nice thing about that though is that you can add that in the edit. So something that I really like about iPhones is that their cameras tend to produce like not the sharpest, most contrasty images, but you can edit that in, whereas it's really hard to like remove contrast once it's done. So it's almost nicer to have a flatter image if you really care about like getting into the edit. But if you just want something to post, I think that the Z Flip created an image that's more pleasing to the eye right off the bat. I think that the iPhone 11 Pro does a little bit better though when you zoom in and you really look at the details of the image. I think that the writing on the red sign is a little bit easier to read, and the red actually seems a little bit better saturated. It seems a little bit oversaturated on the Z Flip. I then popped out to the wide angle lens that both of these phones have, and the properties that the Z Flip had in its initial image kind of come out again, but at a higher degree. Something that I notice a lot with the images that Samsung phones take is that there's often kind of a big difference between the primary camera and the wide camera in terms of contrast and maybe exposure. It seems like the primary just always does a nicer job, and that's the same thing again here. It's very oversaturated, it's a contrasty image. It looks like a Visco girl like edited this photo. That's not to say that it's terrible, it's just to say that it's a little bit over contrasty and oversaturated for my personal taste, but I think that like it catches your eye first. So if you're going for like impact and like catching someone's eye, it might be a better photo. I think that this year though, the discrepancy between the wide and the primary is a little bit less than it has been in the past. So that's a good thing. We're definitely improving. The iPhone 11 Pro wide angle image is better. Like there's definitely better consistency among the three lenses on the iPhone 11 Pro. All right, image number 3. It's a portrait mode test with yours truly. And this is kind of where we see a hardware difference affect the photos that we can get. Oftentimes the differences between images in like these camera tests is just caused by different image processing. Like some manufacturers tend to add contrast, like Google with the Pixel 4, but this is a clear area where the hardware affected this image, and that's because the Z Flip lacks a telephoto lens. So the portrait test and like the live focus mode photo that we got is on the primary lens, so it looks wider, whereas the 11 Pro uses its telephoto lens by default. And what that means is that it looks a little bit more DSLR-like from like the get-go, because a lot of photos that are taken on a DSLR are taken from like that closer range when it's a portrait, so it just has that more DSLR effect. I'm glad though that Samsung decided to not do the telephoto and instead do the wide. The wide offers a lot more of a fun lens than the telephoto. Like the telephoto is great for detailed shots, but if you're looking for like a lens to kind of get creative with, the wide is that. So I'm glad that if they were going to pick two lenses, that they picked the wide and the primary. In terms of edge detection in this actual picture, they both did not kill it. They did okay. It's not terrible, but there's some areas where it's not amazing. The iPhone 11 Pro did do better though. If you look over my shoulder, like on the Z Flip, the stand is in focus where it shouldn't be, whereas the iPhone 11 Pro, it isn't. And I also think that my skin tone looks a little bit better on the iPhone 11 Pro. Like it looks more healthy and less like I'm cold. The pink tint on the Z Flip makes it look like I was freezing. And I obviously was, as seen by the fact that I'm wearing like this giant jacket. But I think that the iPhone 11 Pro provides a more flattering skin tone. So if you care about that, that's just something to note. All right, I think we should move on to the next image. But before we do that, I gotta say, if you're enjoying this video so far, definitely leave a like and subscribe to the channel because I not only have more camera comparisons coming, but more videos on the Z Flip. All right, back into it. This is a portrait selfie test, and the most obvious difference here that you probably noticed right away is that the images are flipped, but the second biggest difference once we move past that is that they decided to blur out different things. Like the iPhone kept my face and part of my arm in focus, but it blurred out my hair and my necklace, whereas the Z Flip decided to keep me and like my body entirely in focus and just blur out the background behind me. I think that I prefer the Z Flip's approach here, but I would have liked to lessen the effect a little bit because it almost looks like I'm like a cutout in the frame and just paste it on top of it. But the iPhone 11 Pro, it's kind of weird that like certain things like my arm is in focus, but then like my necklace isn't. So that's also kind of weird. Which one do you prefer? Let me know in a comment below. One of the nice things about Samsung's live focus mode is that you can pick what degree you take the shot out in terms of like depth effect, which is nice. I just took this at default to keep it fair. All right, and then here's this photo again, but this time it's without portrait mode or live focus on, and they both look pretty good. If you've been subscribed to this channel for a while, then you know, like I'm not the biggest selfie taker in the world, so either of these would be fine. But if you really care about like quality selfies, then you're probably gonna like the iPhone 11 Pro more because the Z Flip has some serious skin smoothing going on here. But if you're posting on like Instagram stories or something, either of these images are fine. Like exposure is good, the color tone, everything else is very comparable. This one I took in a store so I could test out like the lower light night mode. So this is like a lower light test, but it didn't detect it, so I had to cover the lens to get the option to turn it on the iPhone 11 Pro. Once I turned it on and I snapped the shot, I actually think that the iPhone 11 Pro did maybe a little bit better because the Z Flip went to a hue that's a little bit too cool for my taste. In terms of sharpness though, on my shoe they're pretty similar, but certain areas in the Z Flip image are like a little bit blown out, I think. If you want more night or lower light samples, definitely let me know in a comment below. But this next shot was taken outside with a lot of light, almost too much light for the camera, some might say. And here are the results. When you first look at this image, you may be thinking, wow, they both did a really great job. And they looked that way at first, but the Z Flip actually did a better job with exposure. The dynamic range just performed better. The iPhone 11 Pro blew out the sky completely, whereas the Z Flip didn't, and you can still see the blue in the sky. It looks like a little bit fake, like maybe it should have been toned down a little bit more, but it looks a lot better. And the iPhone 11 Pro also blew out the light in this shot, which isn't ideal because that was the subject. When I went out to the wide lens, the iPhone 11 Pro did a little bit better, like it brought in some of the blue, but a lot of the sky is still like white and overexposed, and the Z Flip still did well with the sky on the wide lens. All right, another image of me, but no portrait mode in this. I took this one in single shot, which is a new mode added to the Z Flip, and it's basically handing all the creative reins over to the camera. So you just hit the shutter button, and it takes a lot of things like photos, edited photos, videos, and then after the duration of time, it like compiles them all for you, which is actually a really cool feature, but I'm not too good to sugarcoat it. The image that I got out of this, like this is the best one out of it. It's very bad. My skin looks really smooth, there's like a weird yellowish hue to it, and the building in the back is a little bit more blown out than the 11 Pro. I think that this is a really cool idea, but I think that I would have gotten a much better photo if I just took it and didn't use single shot. However, if you're someone that likes a lot of edits like all at once, this provided like a black and white photo and like a vintage edit photo. So that's really cool. It's a really good idea. It just needs to get a little bit improved with when it chooses to snap the shot. And skin smoothing is just an issue that like you see over and over again on Samsung photos. Single shot though has potential, and I tried it out with like a juggler when I was using the S20 and S20 Ultra, and that case it was actually sick because it caught the motion and added all these cool effects. So there's potential for it. It's actually pretty good in a lot of cases. It just kind of struck out in this particular one. All right, one quick video test and then one more image to wrap it up. iPhones are known for having incredible video quality, and that holds true. If I had to pick one phone that I would like rely on to consistently get me good video, I would pick the iPhone 11 Pro, but the Z Flip really held its own here. It actually did well with like stabilization and exposure. But for consistency, like it's kind of hit or miss sometimes with Samsung phones for video quality. Sometimes like the dynamic range is off or the saturation is too much. For consistency, if you had one camera to get the shot done right, I'd pick iPhone 11 Pro for video. Last sample is another portrait mode test, and I'm doing so many portrait mode tests of me because it allows me to test like multiple things at once, like of course edge detection, but it also allows me to test dynamic range, focusability, and detail retention. Plus, a lot of the photos that we take on our phones are taken of subjects like people, so it makes sense to include a lot of that in this video. So the iPhone 11 Pro in this image actually did not do a great job with skin tone. Normally, I can rely on the iPhone 11 Pro to provide the most flattering skin tone, but my skin looks way too orange here. And the Z Flip in a similar fashion did not do great with skin tone either, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, it was a little bit too cool and purplish. And again, it makes the photo have a much colder hue to it. The Z Flip also did not perfectly blur out the image next to my arm, whereas the iPhone 11 Pro did. And in the truck in the back on the Z Flip, it's in focus, whereas the iPhone 11 Pro, the cars in the back aren't. I do want to make a note here that I shot this in New York City, so it's really hard to get the exact same image every time. I tried my best, but there's so many moving subjects in the background that if a truck's in one shot, by the time I get ready to take the next shot, the truck is gone. So there is a little bit of a margin of error there, but I still think this is a pretty good test to test out the camera and see in a real world scenario how it would be. And I also feel New York City is just a cool subject. And since I was there for the launch of the Samsung Z Flip, it made sense to just do it there. Honestly, I was surprised how well the Z Flip performed, because this is definitely not a camera focused phone. If you really want amazing camera quality, Samsung would probably point you towards the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra, because that has an 100 times zoom lens and a bunch of other amazing features. So of course you should expect a camera comparison of that with the iPhone 11 Pro. But for a phone that packs a lot of the same camera technology as last year's flagship, the Z Flip did a really, really good job. I was impressed. A lot of content is coming on the Z Flip and the S20 and the S20 Ultra, so subscribe right here to see it. Check out a video on the S20 Ultra here or a video on the Z Flip here, and I'll catch you guys all in the next one. Thank you so much for watching this one. Bye.